Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Detroit Sports Report. I'm Michael Scott, here tonight with a late episode. Make sure you guys are following me on Twitter at Michael Scott PSM for sports coverage and analysis, including all Detroit sports. Make sure you guys are also checking out my column that I write for Fansided at DetroitJackCity.com. We discuss every major Detroit sport like the Pistons, the Lions, the Tigers, the Red Wings, and both Michigan and Michigan State. So I'm going to start you off with a late night show tonight. The first thing I'm going to talk about are the Detroit Pistons. Right now, we got the NBA bubble going on down in Orlando. You got teams like the Bucks, the Rockets, the Lakers, and the Clippers drawing headlines, and you really can't help but wonder what if when it comes to the Detroit Pistons. Because really, quite frankly, you feel a little left out not having your team there in the mix. And we've heard all the talk about a consolation bubble or a NIT bubble where you might have teams like the Pistons and the Warriors working out and facing off. I feel like at this point it's extremely unlikely that may happen. So really, when we're talking about the Pistons in Detroit sports, lately there hasn't been much to talk about. You know, when we think of the Detroit Pistons, we're thinking about one of only 8 teams in league history to win 3 or more NBA championships. And not so long ago, receiving tickets to watch the Detroit Pistons live and in person at the Palace of Auburn Hills was considered by many to be a can't miss opportunity. You and me as fans, obviously we were delighted to contribute to a consecutive home sellout streak that lasted a numerous amount of years while watching probably some of the most hard-nosed basketball in NBA history. The arena hosted both the Bad Boys and Going to Work championship era teams, and we made a good run of it, eventually raised 3 championship title banners into the rafters. And it's really not a stretch to claim that each era likely would have probably raised more banners if not running into other championship teams and dynasties like the Chicago Bulls, the Boston Celtics, the Los Angeles Lakers, and San Antonio Spurs. I don't know about you guys, but if you were ever fortunate enough to have a chance to sit in the upper level suites at the Palace, you could remember the pregame heat rising as flames shot out from behind the hoops at both ends of the court. You know, and after those flames would die down, your eyes would eventually drift to the rafters. There, a little technical difficulty here for a second. Sorry about that, guys. Had a video feed come in. But after the flames died down, your eyes would eventually drift up into those rafters, right? And we're talking about the heat and the flames behind the baskets. And once those flames died down, your eyes would drift up and you'd see the jerseys of all those retired players, right? And really, when you think about it, you're looking at guys like Isaiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, Ben Wallace, Chauncey Billups, Joe Dumars. There's a whole collective of guys up there, and really they're basically memories at this point of a past and a time that's left the Detroit Pistons, because in the past, 10 years, the Pistons have fallen off extremely. It has to do with, 1, a lot of bad drafting, 2, failure to bring in quality free agents. Detroit's not exactly a destination or a mass media market. So a lot of times you're not going to get those players that are looking to capitalize on their brand and make millions. But let's go back to those jerseys in the rafters. You know, those are reminders, I guess, or essentially the ghosts of Detroit's championship past. After setting an NBA futility record of 14 straight playoff losses dating back to 2008. Those fabrics in the ceiling really have been relegated to nothing more, in my mind, than memories haunting Motor City basketball fans everywhere. And really, every NBA team raises banners, right? But for organizations like the Lakers, you don't often need them as reminders because former legends like Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar can usually be found roaming around Staples Center in Los Angeles. And really, when you think about other teams, the same goes for the Boston Celtics, where you can often find Bill Russell, Danny Ainge, or Paul Pierce roaming around HD Garden. In San Antonio, you go out west. That's a small market, but they're rich in tradition, and it's not unusual to come across David the Admiral Robinson or run into guys like Tim Duncan, who's currently serving as an assistant coach on Greg Popovich's staff as they pass down championship traditions, trying to help mold the next wave of superstars in each of these organizations. So my question is really, when we're talking about Detroit basketball, where are Detroit Pistons legends like Isaiah Thomas? And out of all the poor choices that we've hired as head coaches since Larry Brown's departure, why haven't guys like Bill Laimbeer been brought in to continue that championship winning tradition in toughness? I mean, it's a good question, right? The rest of the list reads a little like this. There's guys like Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Chauncey Billups, Tayshaun Prince, Richard Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace, and Ben Wallace. And there's a handful of other guys as well that are rich in Detroit basketball championship tradition. It's really rare to come across any of these guys now as the teams play their home games at Little Caesars Arena. Bill Davidson sold the team to Tom Gores. Tom Gores moves the team downtown. He wants to be in Detroit. And essentially they take a bulldozer to the Palace of Auburn Hills or blow it up, and eventually it eliminates all of that tradition. Now, I don't know about you guys, but all these past champions are still involved in basketball in some capacity, right? And in my mind, it's about time that we return that championship tradition back to the Motor City and back to Detroit, and we get this basketball team right back on the right track. For all you guys listening out there, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Michael Scott PSM for sports coverage and analysis. I cover all Detroit sports. Make sure you read my column on Fansided at DetroitJockCity.com. You'll see me pop up on there a few days a week, contributing what I like to think is some engaging content for the Detroit sports fan outside of the norm, with sources like the Detroit Free Press or the Detroit News. So, again, make sure throughout the show you guys are leaving comments if at all interested. And then also, if you want me to bring you in via live stream, call into the show, let me know. I'll send you a link, and we can bring you in right over your smartphone. So now it's time to see these Detroit Piston greats return to Motown, right? We want to continue this championship tradition. So nostalgia and championship traditions have carried a handful of franchises through their down years. It's those legends and stars that bridge the gap for these franchises before the front office eventually gets things right, returning the organization to relevancy. We saw it during time periods where the Lakers were down, when Kobe Bryant was still hanging around, but the team wasn't necessarily so good. And they were able to capitalize on that tradition and those champions being at least around the organization, like Magic Johnson and Kareem, while bridging the gap to the time period when they brought in LeBron James and Anthony Davis and essentially reloaded this Lakers team, who just happened to win tonight against the Jazz. They're 2-1 in the bubble so far, but that's a different story for another day. So Detroit Pistons owner Tom Gores and executive Ed Stefanski have done an excellent job of acquiring head coach Dwayne Casey and GM Troy Weaver to lead the team through this, what they would like to call restoring period. But in my opinion, Gores can still do more. With the potential lottery pick in the upcoming draft and plenty of cap space in hand to go out and pursue marquee free agents, I'd say it's time for Gores and the Pistons franchise to pull out all the stops. Surely there have to be positions available in the Motor City for these Detroit Pistons legends. There's got to be positions available for these guys. They're like royalty, right? So whether it be in the press box, the front office, or the sideline, bringing back these champions will reinvigorate both the current players on this roster and the fan base in Detroit. You bring these guys back in, and you can forget about the slumping attendance. The seats will obviously start filling up again. Then you can also forget about the playoff droughts because the Pistons will be back to their winning ways. You start bringing in talent. You got plenty of cap space. You mold these teams in the eyes of champions, and that's what they will strive to be and return to again. Right now, the Detroit Pistons don't really seem to have any of that, but it is possible. And Gores obviously is a pretty wealthy man. He has the means to go out there and make that happen. Isaiah Thomas has become a great ambassador for the game of basketball. But why isn't he currently an ambassador for Detroit basketball? I mean, that's a question that's been running through my mind for the past couple days since I wrote this story. And then certainly Joe Dumars has something to offer. After all, he was the architect of their championship team for the Going to Work Pistons. And I'm sure he's healed from his wounds, from separating from the team as GM. It's been quite a long time now. And then you got Bill Laimbeer. His toughness and excitement are definitely needed somewhere near the sidelines. But he's halfway across the country coaching in the WNBA because nobody in the NBA will give him a shot. Essentially, we'd be the only team that would hire Bill Laimbeer. And at this point, my question is, why not? The guy knows how to win on both a professional athlete's level and a professional coach's level, because he's done well with the Shock in the past and other WNBA teams. Tayshaun Prince is out there, and Tayshaun Prince is working in the Memphis Grizzlies organization, and he's a prime candidate to eventually become a GM for some NBA team. So why isn't he working here at home in Detroit's front office instead of Memphis's? Bring Chauncey Billups back in. Let him lead the organization in some capacity. It's what he does best. Chauncey Billups is a natural-born leader. And these are moves that are essential to execute, right? So envision, walking in to a room as a free agent and getting ready to be pitched by a united front of these Detroit Pistons champions. In my opinion, that's when the teams will start raising NBA banners again. Because at that point, how can you say no to the winning tradition? Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you guys are reaching out in the comment section, and also make sure you guys are calling in via Face now tonight, late night, on the Detroit Sports Report. With that being said, we're going to go out and switch up gears here. Before I do that, I want to make sure I'm mentioning to you guys, tune in every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Byron Hazley and I, we host a great podcast, The Front Porch Tailgate, where we cover a wide variety of national sports. Make sure you guys check in for that. You can find that podcast available wherever podcasts can be found on platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple, SoundCloud, and you can even catch the live stream on YouTube. Go check that out as well. All right, so we're going to switch up gears here. Let's talk a little bit about the Detroit Lions. Let's talk a little bit about Matthew Stafford. So it was reported last week that Matthew Stafford was in the COVID-19 protocol for the Detroit Lions, but it wasn't necessarily at that point determined that he actually contracted COVID-19. Well, earlier today, reports came out in Detroit that he actually was placed on the reserve COVID-19 list due to the positive test. So he's got COVID. This is something the Detroit Lions and Matthew Stafford's family are currently managing. And really, it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Because, as you guys all know, Matthew Stafford is a gamer. This is a guy who oftentimes plays hurt. This is a guy who oftentimes doesn't like to miss games. He's only missed 16 games in his, I believe, 11-year career. And there's a lot of optimism surrounding the Detroit Lions' upcoming season. It's year 3 of the Quinn Patricia faction here in Detroit. As you know, Martha Ford pushed out a mandate via team president Rob Wood last year that the Detroit Lions are expected to win and compete this year. And it's essentially one of those scenarios where it's going to be playoffs or bust. Want to give a special shout out to one of our viewers, Joe, out there listening. Joe says to keep the content coming, brother. Don't stop. Joe, I am not going to stop for anybody. It's the people like you that keep me going on a daily basis, and I'm glad you're enjoying listening out there. So, last week, Matthew Stafford received a test on Friday when he was asymptomatic, meaning he had passed tests on Tuesday and Wednesday, right? So the positive test result from last Friday's test landed him on the reserve COVID-19 list. I want to shout out to a special friend, a longtime old day friend, Frank. Frank, I hope you're doing well. It's been years. I haven't heard from you. You have to get a hold of me after the show. I'd love to hear how you're doing, my man. So Stafford now has to go through the intake process of being cleared to rejoin the team. Now, he's not the only Lion that's been affected by this, right? You got other guys like Kenny Galladay, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Coleman, Isaac Nauta, Amani Arwari, Jalen Elliott, and Arian Sipos. They're also all on the reserve COVID-19 list for Detroit right now at the moment. So that's a handful of guys, right? And this is a team that's getting set to eventually start their season, right? They reported for testing for camp. They're going to be working on conditioning drills and doing office work and film sessions and blackboard stuff, things like that over the next couple weeks before they finally take the field as a collective unit. At that time, I don't know whether or not the rookies and the veterans will be mixed because they were keeping them separate at one point. The exact timeline for that, I'm not sure about. But what I am sure about is that this news for Matthew Stafford and the Detroit Lions could potentially be a big deal, because now what you're looking at is a situation where you have Matthew Stafford. Everybody knows that his wife, Kelly Stafford, has just had a long bout with cancer that she beat last year, which I'm sure has certainly weakened her immune system. And they also have a newborn child in the home. they gave birth to, I believe, their fourth child not too long ago, right? So I guess the reason why that pertains to the Detroit Lions and the Matthew Stafford, because now you're looking at a situation where this guy's thinking about his family and whether or not it makes sense at this point for him to compete this season, right? Because in this day and age, when it comes to COVID-19, you really don't want to risk anything with your health, right? I don't think the virus or the issue, in my opinion, is as serious as the media's made it out to be. But at the same time, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know for sure. You see different conflicting reports all over social media every day. So my opinion on the matter is you'd rather be safe than sorry, right? So digressing back to Matthew Stafford, you're sitting here thinking, okay, you're asking yourself the question, is it worth playing in the NFL for the Detroit Lions this season to potentially put my family at risk? Because honestly, at this point, they may or may have not already been exposed to it. I'm not sure about the details surrounding Matthew Stafford's situation once camp starts, whether or not he goes home every night or whether he's been overly cautious and staying remotely somewhere away from the family's home. But what I do know is if your family hasn't been exposed, do you continue risking exposing them throughout the season? Because Matthew Stafford is a big-time family man, but he also has a day job as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. Now, this is a season where the Lions have brought in a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball to help breed in that new New England Patriots-esque culture that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn have been trying to do for the past 3 years. They shipped Slay and Damon Snacks Harrison out of town, and they have essentially brought in all these cast-offs from the New England Patriots, like Jerron Harmon, the safety. They've brought in Jamie Collins, a fantastic do-it-all jackknife linebacker, over from the Patriots. He's going to help add to the pass rush element of the game, help apply some pressure just like Trey Flowers. They just drafted rookie Jeff Okudah. They've brought in a lot of different guys, right? And so really, there's a lot to be optimistic about the Detroit Lions this year. Before Matthew Stafford got hurt last year, the offense was one of the higher scoring offenses in the entire National Football League. And at midseason's point, it really had seemed like Matthew Stafford was trending towards being an MVP candidate. Well, now you finally got him back healthy from the injured list. That back is healthy. You brought in a new defense, and what you have essentially is an offense where you went out and drafted a rookie running back in the second round who's supposed to be the top running back in the draft. You went out and got a few old linemen to help improve that offensive line that was marginal last season. You're already good at the wide receiver position, and you're hoping last year's first-round pick and tight end TJ Hawkinson can actually turn into something here and develop and play in the mold of, let's say, a Rob Gronkowski for Matthew Stafford, because even though he's had the benefit of playing with guys like Kelvin Johnson and Golden Tate at times during his career, Matthew Stafford's really never had a consistent quality tight end that was able to just be relied on down the field. And I think TJ Hawkinson would essentially add another element to Matthew Stafford's game, right? Adding DeAndre Swift in the backfield and an actual running game, which has been basically anemic since Barry Sanders left town on the eve of training camp in 1999, faxing in his retirement. Detroit's only had 3 1,000-yard rushers in that time. And the last guy was Reggie Bush back in 2013, right? They were really high on Kerryon Johnson after drafting him a few years ago. But last year he dealt with a little bit of injury concerns, and there's been questions now that whether or not he can be the primary back and carry the load all by himself. That's a big reason why they went out and got DeAndre Swift out of Georgia in the draft. Now, let me tell you, when I watched DeAndre Swift playing on film after we drafted him, I got pretty excited. Initially, I wasn't that excited because I knew he played for one of the better programs in the country, and I knew he was a starting back, but his numbers, his rushing numbers, weren't really eye-popping, and they didn't really jump off the page, right? But when you take a look at things and you consider the fact of what is now called the eye test, and you watch him play on the field, DeAndre Swift, ladies and gentlemen, is a big play waiting to happen. He's capable of breaking a big run inside or outside the tackles at any given time. He's capable of catching the ball out of the backfield and turning it into a 25-yard gain. And he's capable of getting the Detroit Lions into the end zone, which is something they've really lacked at times throughout the years. And he's going to be a guy that's capable of being an every down back and playing all three downs, right? And I think it's going to work out good for the Detroit Lions to add that complement and add that run game to what is already a solid or quality passing attack with Matthew Stafford at the helm. You talk about wide receiver Kenny Golladay, obviously one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. He's not a guy that just blows past people and gains great separation down the field, but he is a vertical threat. And this is a guy who led the NFL last year with 11 touchdowns. You sit back and you got to think it's crazy that guys like Golladay and Matthew Stafford, Trey Flowers, these are all guys that played pretty well, and they were all recently snubbed on the NFL's top 100 players list for 2020. And really, you don't understand it. So I guess the real question is, after testing positive for COVID-19 and considering all the facts involved about how Detroit's primed to essentially be a sleeper contender for the upcoming year, which a lot of people are predicting around the league and a lot of experts in analysis and scouts, does Matthew Stafford actually hit the field and play? Leave your comments in the comment section, or let me know if you want to come in through the live stream. Jump on your smartphone. We can talk about it right now, face to face, right here on the Detroit Sports Report. Make sure that you guys listening out there follow me on Twitter at Michael Scott PSM for sports coverage and analysis, including all Detroit sports, as well as a wide variety of national sports. Make sure you guys are heading over to Fansided and their subsidiary DetroitJockCity.com. I have a weekly or daily running column over there that I chime in on a few times a week talking about different sports. There's a lot of good content on there as well from some of my co-workers there. And, let's keep this thing rolling right here on the Detroit Sports Report right now, guys. So without further ado, since we're already on the topic of NFL football and we're talking about the Detroit Lions, let's talk a little bit about some news that broke last Friday. Antonio Brown was suspended 8 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy. I'm not sure if you guys have really been keeping an eye on the Antonio Brown situation dating back to last year, but I have been on the up and up on the Antonio Brown watch. And let me tell you, watching this guy on a daily basis between what's going on in mainstream outlets like ESPN, Fox, you see him on national broadcast syndications like CNN, CBS News, as well as a handful of others. And then watching him on social media and his different platforms like Instagram or Twitter. Watching Antonio Brown has been a combination of witnessing something so sad, but at the same time so entertaining and so hilarious. It's like a train wreck, really. You can't help but look away, right? So Antonio Brown finally, after more than a year waiting on a suspension from the NFL for his behavior, he was arrested last January in a burglary battery incident with a moving truck driver. He was also implicated in sexual misconduct allegations with his former trainer, Brittany Taylor, as well as another woman in Pittsburgh that was hired to paint a mural of him. Those lawsuits are still ongoing, and it still keeps him open and susceptible to further suspension, right? So basically, at this point, you got to sit there and think, what does this 8-game suspension mean for Antonio Brown and his future prospects in the NFL? And do you think the Detroit Lions should potentially consider going out and making a pitch for this guy to come in and play? It's really, at this point, like a high risk, high reward situation, right? Because on one hand, what you're getting is a really high quality athlete, one of the premier receivers in the NFL over the last decade, a guy that's capable of doing it all on the field. We all know he has an incredible work ethic, but then the risk is bringing him back onto your team at a time, I guess, if you're the Detroit Lions, where you're essentially trying to usher in a culture. And I don't know whether or not Antonio Brown fits that culture. And I'm going to be completely honest. When we're thinking about teams like the New England Patriots, where head coach Matt Patricia has stemmed from, I really don't think that Antonio Brown would be a fit for this team. But there are a lot of NFL teams out there that would probably be willing to take a flyer on Antonio Brown, because he certainly got the talent, right? I don't know. What do you guys think? Post your comments in the comment section below. Make sure you guys are reaching out to me on the live stream. I'll bring you in live on this feed right now. I'll send you a link. We'll go through FaceTime. We'll get you on the show as a guest. Get on here, mix it up. We'll talk a little bit about Detroit sports, right? We've talked about the Lions and the Matt Stafford situation. We've talked a little bit about what's going on with the COVID-19 situation in Detroit and why essentially Matt Stafford at this point is forced to make a choice whether or not he's going to actually hit the field for the Detroit Lions this season and risk further exposing to the people around him, his loved ones, his family. Hopefully he's in quarantine right now, getting better. I really don't know. We haven't received that report yet. But transitioning, I said, back into the Antonio Brown situation, what can we really expect from Antonio Brown after this suspension? And would we consider him to be a good fit for the Detroit Lions at this point? You tell me. I say no, but at the same time, you never really know what you're going to get with this guy, right? So Antonio Brown had quite the controversial past year and a half. We talked about all the legal trouble he was in, but what we didn't talk about is the fact that he's not exactly a quality teammate at this point, right? So he had run-ins. He burned a lot of bridges in Pittsburgh when he left. He was on social media bashing Ben Roethlisberger, the longtime Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, and a guy who, on the field, they seem to have a really great connection. Antonio Brown never had a problem getting the ball from Roethlisberger, and Roethlisberger's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL over the past 15 years, and Antonio Brown has been his primary receiving threat for about, I'd say, the last decade, right? Now, Antonio Brown's not a guy who I would consider an elite all-time receiver, but he has trended up towards the upper echelon of NFL receivers all-time lists, right? Now, in most normal circumstances, an individual like Antonio Brown would be upset and file a grievance against the league after learning of his upcoming 8-game suspension. Instead, the receiver was overcome with joy, and he took to Instagram expressing that happiness, right? This punishment, it was handed down by NFL special counsel for conduct, Todd Jones. It doesn't end the league's investigation of Brown's personal conduct, right? So that situation and the ongoing civil suit with his former trainer, Brittany Taylor, if that in fact brings to evidence new light of misconduct, Brown could face further punishment from the NFL. So he burned bridges in Pittsburgh. He burned bridges in Oakland. That was short-lived. And the former All-Pro receiver ended up getting cut after being brought on by the Patriots and playing one great game with Tom Brady last fall due to his behavior amid those allegations of rape and sexual misconduct. The Patriots told him to keep his ego in check, to not have contact with his alleger, and Antonio Brown turned around and instead chose to follow his plan. He found that it would be better suited for him to go out and harass the alleged victim via text message or social media, whatever it may be. And subsequently, the Patriots ended up cutting him a few days later, right before his contract guaranteed. And he ended up losing out on millions. And that's something that he's filed grievances with the league and is since settled on, I believe, with the New England Patriots. So he's found himself in a lot of legal trouble, a lot of professional trouble, both on and off the football field. So what does this suspension really mean for Antonio Brown's future in the NFL? Well, in short, the league ruling will actually be considered a small victory, I guess you would say, for the controversial receiver in his camp. Brown's already stated that he will not be appealing the ruling, which is something you don't usually see. A lot of times you really see guys in the NFL appealing these rulings and trying to get them shortened so that they can get back on the field. But after nearly a year of turmoil, it seems as if Antonio Brown is ready to wake up from this nightmare that he's been living, and he wants to return to glory on the gridiron. You know, the NFL can be a forgiving league at times. We've seen it time and time again with guys like Josh Gordon, Michael Vick, as well as a handful of others. And they're very forgiving, especially if you have talent. And being completely honest, Antonio Brown's talent is undeniable. He's been widely recognized as the top receiver over the last decade by a multitude of sources, including Pro Football Focus. And it's publications like that that are expecting Brown to garner a lot of interest on the free agent market. He's been linked to teams like the Baltimore Ravens and the Seattle Seahawks after conducting personal offseason workouts with both reigning NFL MVP Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson. We've seen those workouts out on social media. The quarterbacks have been advocating for their teams to give Antonio Brown a chance and to bring him in and sign him. It's because on the field, he's an impact player and he's got a lot of talent. So now that the future is more certain for Brown, he's expected to draw plenty of interest from other teams throughout the league. And it wouldn't be shocking to see him land with a contender like New Orleans, Tennessee, and even a long shot contender like Houston, who recently traded away their top receiver in DeAndre Hopkins to Arizona last winter. So really, if you're the Detroit Lions or any other NFL franchise, the question you got to ask yourself is, what type of risk will a team be assuming by signing Antonio Brown? Got Big Neek out there listening. Big Neek, good to hear from you. I would love to hear you chime in via the live stream. Let me know. I'll send you out a link. We'll bring you on via FaceTime. Another listener out there, Ryan, he's talking about Antonio Brown's health. And he says Antonio Brown's taken some hard hits to the head. And he thinks that Antonio Brown might have CTE just based on his behavior off the field. Now, Ryan, you make a really good point, right? Because he has taken some really big hits, specifically the one from Vontaze Burfict a few years ago. And we know that CTE definitely can have an effect on these guys and their decision-making. And Antonio Brown's not the biggest guy in the world, and he's never been a guy that's afraid to go over the middle. I'm not a medical expert, so I can't be 100% certain why Antonio Brown has made these decisions he's made. I'm going to be completely honest when it comes to the speculation of him maybe having CTE. I don't think you're very far off. I think that does factor into it, and it does play a role in what's transpired over the past year. But let's digress back to the question, right? What type of risk will an NFL franchise assume by signing Antonio Brown? Any team looking to acquire Brown's services will be putting themselves in a high-risk, high-reward type of situation. So what does that mean? Well, the receiver's resume and work ethic are reflective of a consummate professional. However, his on and off field antics sometimes are not, right? So since his departure, like we talked about from the Steelers, he's fallen from grace. He's had trouble in and out of the locker room. He's had trouble in and out of the courtroom. And he took to social media after learning of the suspension, and he vowed to be a better teammate. He vowed to have a renewed work ethic and be the best player he could be. And he's got the goal now of working hard to produce his best NFL season. And the question you really got to ask is Antonio Brown going to take advantage of the second chance that he's getting, right? Because no matter what happens, the only thing you can really be certain of is that Antonio Brown, whether it's positive or negative, will definitely be a distraction to your team in the locker room. The media circuses in Oakland and New England are something that any prospective employer would have to consider. And in my opinion, if you're a team like the Detroit Lions, obviously you would have your reservations. You know, that media circus obviously would have its peaks and valleys, right? Because at first, when signing Brown and getting into training camp, you would immediately fall under siege from a barrage of media reporters. And then as training camp went on and you got closer to the season, obviously that hype would die down once the season began, because Brown would be forced to sit out the first 8 games of the season without pay and stay away from the team. But then finally, at the midway point of the season, that attention would spike again as his impending return would draw nearer, right? And at that time, let's say you're a team like the Detroit Lions and you get off to a hot start and you're 5-3 or you're 6-2 and you're on a roll and you're contending for the playoffs. How would injecting a personality like Antonio Brown affect your locker room? How would that affect Brown's new teammates, right? Would they be open to the idea of bringing him in? Would they be sitting there thinking, well, we've gotten this far so far, we don't really need him? Let's say he's not getting the ball 10 times a game, that guys like Kenny Golladay are getting plenty of passes thrown their way, and DeAndre Swift's out there running all over defenses. How is Antonio Brown going to react in a game when he may only get 2 or 3 targets and 1 or 2 catches? I mean, it's an honest question, and there's no certain answer, because what we've seen at this point is that Antonio Brown's behavior is extremely unpredictable. could Antonio Brown return to a level similar to what we've seen in the past? And that's a level where he's surely trending towards an enshrinement in Canton in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as long as he's able to recover from this layoff and become a renewed teammate and be a better leader in the locker room and win the media back on his side. There's a lot of questions surrounding his future with the Taylor matter too, right? As I noted before, the NFL's investigation is still ongoing. And as a team, you possibly risk entering an all-for-nothing situation where you bring Brown in and you cross all those bridges as far as the locker room questions go. And then you look at a situation where if new elements come to light in court, that he may never actually hit the playing field for you. And it's really an all-or-nothing situation where you've not only affected the locker room from a chemistry standpoint, but you've also wasted time, money, and effort signing a guy who's never actually going to hit the field for you. So the only thing really anyone can be certain of at this point is that Brown's interest from teams should remain high, because there's going to be plenty of teams out there willing to gamble on his talent. You might see a team like the Green Bay Packers go out and get him. Devin Funchess is going to sit out for the upcoming season because of COVID-19. And that team really didn't address a big need at the receiver position in this past draft. Instead, they went out and got the heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, which is a highly controversial move considered to be by everybody really at this point. But really, the only thing you can consider serious is that there will be plenty of teams willing to gamble on Antonio Brown's talent across the NFL. And that gamble or that payoff assures that any team that's actually interested in Brown shouldn't wait very long, because, like I said, it's a high risk, high reward situation. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up the show tonight. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Michael Scott PSM for sports coverage and analysis, including all Detroit sports. Make sure you guys are going out and reading my column for Fansided. It's at DetroitJockCity.com. I show up there a few times a week and drop some Detroit nostalgia and Detroit knowledge on you guys. And make sure you guys are checking that out. Also, make sure you guys are tuning in every Wednesday for the live stream of the Front Porch Tailgate podcast that I do with Byron Hazley. It's a great show. We cover a wide variety of sports topics like Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, NCAA, and mixed martial arts. That podcast is available to listen to on all major platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google, SoundCloud, and you can even watch it on YouTube. Make sure you guys are all checking that out. But thanks for listening. Thank you, all you guys who tuned in or all you guys who commented throughout the show. I look forward to hearing from you guys more in the future. I'm Michael Scott, and you guys have been listening to the Detroit Sports Report. Have a great rest.